What's the most insane thing you've put your body through? I got my tonsils out at 17 and was taking hydrocodone to manage the pain. I didn't poop for 8 days, and on that 8th day I only managed a couple bunny turds. The 10th day rolls around, so I get nervous and do an enema, because Miralax didn't work. So, my understanding of enemas is that you kind of absorb the water, and it makes your stool softer. This was not the case for me. After 30 seconds I couldn't hold it anymore. I get off the floor and run to the bathroom. It was extremely relieving, until I looked down and realized that the explosion was completely clear. I then felt my stomach tighten and getting worse. I'm a man, but I think I was having full body contractions trying to get that poop out. After 30 minutes of my insides trying to evacuate themselves, it happened. I pushed so hard I thought my asshole was going to explode. I look down and see a soda can-sized conglomerate of containing the last 10 days of my diet. It wasn't even remotely small enough to flush, so I got an old toothbrush and broke it up. My asshole felt loose for a week. It was the worst of my life. Always take laxatives with opioids if you don't poop the first couple days. I carried a woman 4 miles down a rocky trail after discovering she'd injured herself. Storms were approaching and she was not quite below tree line. I learned later that she'd broken her tibia and fibula. I'm a 5 feet 6 inches 130 pounds woman. I was insanely sore the next day. I just survived a 13-hour surgery. I had a blood infection that covered my insides and my heart, which led to valve replacement, but clearing the infection is what took forever. Then, 8 days on the ECMO machine while in an induced coma, and a total of 50 days in the hospital. I'm incredibly lucky to be alive. I'm 66, so it forced me to retire. 2 rounds of chemo along with monthly shots that kick my bone marrow into overdrive. Slated for my 3rd chemo round by year's end. My leukemia is treatable but not curable, so I get to do this every so often until a cure is found. I once went through an intense bout of serotonin syndrome. My doctor prescribed me 2 antidepressants that shouldn't be taken together. I ended up taking 2 high doses of one of them, then about 8 hours later I was in a hospital with severe anxiety, shakes, fever, extremely high heart rate, and more. I was like that for about 4 days before I was discharged, and the effects didn't fully wear off for nearly a month. Absolute worst time of my life, and I struggled to even grasp what my body went through during that time. I told myself I could run a marathon, so I started training, and did pretty good to start. I did a couple of 10 kilometers and a 20 kilometer. I scheduled a half marathon, and trained for it, and did fine while training. Well, the day of the half marathon, it was so much hotter and humid than I had trained for. About 5 miles and I realized I was in trouble. I was sweating like crazy, and I couldn't hydrate fast enough. About 9 miles and I started cramping and had to walk. I decided to push through and ended up walking the rest of the way. Then I sat down and everything in my body started cramping, my toes, fingers, sides, neck, legs, it was awful. My wife saw I was doing bad and went and got a medic. Then the next thing I remember is I woke up in the back of an ambulance, and my wife was there as well. It took us to the closest hospital, put me on an IV to rehydrate me, and about 8 hours later I started feeling better. I once spent 56 hours in a row awake when I was deployed to Iraq, and it wasn't like an overnight gaming session. It was August, in a desert, with full gear. The regular sleep cycle was already but we kept taking mortars during my sleep cycles. There was a point around 40 hours in that I thought I would die of exhaustion, and a small part of me wished the mortars would at least offer some relief. I signed up for a medical trial study for $5,000. It was an established drug, so they knew exactly what it would do to me. That was coming off patent and the new manufacturer had to go through trials. The main side effect they warned me of was bone pain. I had to do 2 times 3-day inpatient stays, 1 shot in the arm and blood draws every hour or so. We all had to eat the same food at the same time, and it was more food than I could physically stomach but had to choke it down or risk not getting paid. Food was good though. I got the bone pain and was allergic to the drug. I called the nurse about some weird spots on my arm, and she told me they were mosquito bites. I accepted this even though I knew 100% they were not mosquito bites that had somehow arisen in the past 2 minutes, but whatever. Then my breathing started getting all wheezy, so I called her over again. She very calmly told me everything was fine and then sprinted out of the room to get a doctor while my throat started closing up. They gave me an antihistamine, and everything was all good, except now my data was worthless, so they said I didn't have to come back for the second stay and that I could go after my third day was up and I would still get paid. However, I did get the bone pain side effect. My hips and thighs were aching relentlessly the whole time, and I had a terrible headache. They couldn't give me anything other than paracetamol for it, so that kind of sucked, but it wasn't too bad, at least the bed was comfy. I don't know if it was the drug, or the reaction, or the antihistamine, or the bone pain, or the buckets of food they were making me eat, but I slept for pretty much the next 50 hours. When I wasn't sleeping, I was watching some shows on the free Wi-Fi, and then got to go home with $5,000. I would do it all once again. Worked in the game industry shipping a game that rather unexpectedly became a global phenomenon that absolutely none of us were prepared for. The solution was to have producers coordinate teams and time zones across the world so that developers get to sleep, but work continues. Except, as a junior producer, I had no bargaining rights for time off, even for just the weekend. After over 18 months without a day off and not getting more than 3 hours of sleep at a time, my body just gave up. I ignored the resting heart rate of 120, the blood pressure through the roof, constant migraines, but then tremors, GI issues, memory and hair loss started to get me worried. Stupidly, the wake-up call was my boss scolding me for underperforming while she was taking weekends off and reasonable amounts of vacation time. My arguments to HR fell on deaf ears, and all I got back was, "If you're serious about being a producer in this industry, you have to really want it." So, I left the industry. It took 3 years to repair the bulk of the damage, but there's not a single corporate job out there that's worth your life. I don't care if it sounds like your dream job, it's still a company and you are expendable to them. I was awake for 4 days straight once. It wasn't intentionally. I'd been having horrific insomnia for over a year and not even heavy things like Ambien or Seroquel could knock me out. I had just gone into work on the 4th day, opened the store, and was suddenly hit by a tsunami of exhaustion. I called the other manager, and told them I was sick and had to leave immediately. Somehow, I drove myself the 10 minutes home. If I had left when I did, I would have passed out on the stockroom floor. I had a head-on collision. The car that hit me was going 105 miles per hour, while I was going 55 miles per hour. I didn't have airbags or even shoulder belts. I hit the steering wheel hard enough to break the column at the tilt joint. My face was crushed, my spine was dislocated, both legs were broken as well as one of my arms, and I had a torn intestine. 2 months in the hospital with my mouth wired shut and unable to even sit up. It was hell for someone as claustrophobic and talkative as me. Last summer I went for a hike up on a mountain. It was pretty high altitude, and I took some water and a bit of snacks. The mountain had 2 trails that added together made a loop of about 18 miles. I got part of the way to the top. But the trail had just opened for the spring and many trees had fallen over the trail. No worries, just hop over them, but some were waist high. After about 2 hours of this, I was getting real sick of it. I made it to the top and started to head back down. I decided to do the loop instead of going straight back the way I went up. Going down should be easy, right? Wrong. I'm now out of water and snacks and I can feel my leg muscles starting to seize from lack of electrolytes. Every step down was painful, and every tree to hop over was excruciating. I went from hopping to stepping up onto, to kind of laying on the log and sliding my legs over. I got to the bottom finally and my kidneys started hurting. I had stopped sweating even though it was early afternoon and heating up quick. There was a stream in the valley that, in my younger days, I would not have hesitated to drink from, but watching survival shows had made me wary of giardia and the like. So, I told myself not to drink it. I was coming to the home stretch to get the connector trail to where my car was parked, and the sign said I still had 3 miles to go. I was literally running on fumes. My legs were one wrong move from cramping uncontrollably, my kidneys were hurting, my vision was swimmy and blurry. I saw a group of kids and a couple of adults on the trail. So I asked if they could spare some water, right? Nope, I didn't even think about it until they were gone over the hill, and there was no way I could run back to catch them. I did make it to the end of the 21 miles to my car where I gulped down a 32-ounce Gatorade in one sip. I had water and food in the car and recovered quickly, but it occurred to me how close I had really come to my body just shutting down and dying up there. Convinced myself I could work 2 full-time jobs, and I did. I worked 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Luckily, the places were across the street from one another. I gained an insane amount of weight, and an undiagnosed autoimmune disorder decided to show up. I did this for an entire year and often moaned in pain from no sleep. Now I work from home and make double what I made with the two combined. I always told myself, if doctors can do it, I can do it. I'm certain it took 10 years from my life. I've once done a season of grape picking in France. It was also my last time ever. The physical work is torture, in the scorching sun all day, and sometimes in the rain. You have to pick grapes all the way up to the horizon. The best part is you walk through the hedges with two people a row. One of you picks the upper part of the plant, and the other does the lower part. The upper part is just bending over a little, so try to be bent over for a whole day. The other person must crawl. Try crawling through mud all day when it's raining. I mean, it was a nice experience to know what those people go through, and I am forever humbled to anyone who does that kind of physical job.